At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood finally stopped hiding behind the myth he had built. And when he spoke about Sondra Locke, he didn't sound like a Hollywood icon reflecting on a past relationship. He sounded like a man standing in front of the one truth he had spent most of his life trying not to face. His voice wasn't angry, or nostalgic, or theatrical. It was quiet, unsteady, heavy, like someone who knew the words he was about to say would cost him something. She was the only one who could do that to me. 9 simple words, but they didn't sound like a statement, they sounded like a confession. Not the kind you make to the world, but the kind you spend decades avoiding until time finally corners you and leaves you nowhere else to run. That sentence didn't carry rage, it carried something colder. The weight of a memory that never softened, never blurred, never faded. The kind of memory that follows you through every stage of your life, no matter how hard you try to outrun it. Through marriages that came after, through films that won awards, through decades of public appearances and private moments. Always there, always waiting, always reminding you of the one thing you destroyed that you can never rebuild. Because for Clint Eastwood, a man who built his entire identity around control, distance, and emotional restraint, Sondra Locke was not just another woman from his past. She was the one chapter he never closed, the one fracture in the armor he never repaired, the one person who saw who he really was and refused to be intimidated by him. And when she left, she didn't just walk out of his life, she left him with silence. And Clint Eastwood never knew what to do with silence, because his entire career was built on silence. The pregnant pause, the meaningful stare, the refusal to explain or justify. That silence made him millions, made him a legend, made him an icon of American masculinity. But that was performed silence, controlled silence, silence as a tool. This was different. This was the silence that comes after you've destroyed something irreplaceable. The silence that sounds like an accusation. The silence that follows you into every quiet moment for the rest of your life. He spent his life in motion. Film sets, interviews, political speeches, red carpets, editing rooms, always moving, always working, always staying busy enough to drown out the spaces in between, because stillness made room for memory, and memory made room for Sondra, and he never liked the version of himself that appeared when everything else went quiet. That version wasn't the legend, wasn't the icon, wasn't the man with no name. That version was just Clint, flawed, damaged, capable of cruelty, capable of using someone's love as a weapon against them. To the world, he was unbreakable, the man with no name, the hard-eyed gunslinger, the stoic figure who never flinched. People mistook that distance for strength. They thought the silence was confidence. They believed the myth so completely that they stopped imagining there was anything underneath it. And Clint encouraged that belief, cultivated it, built his entire public persona around it. Because as long as people believed the myth, he didn't have to confront the reality. But she did. She saw through him in a way no one else ever had. Past the squint, past the measured tone, past the studied calm. She saw the man who built walls because he didn't trust what would happen without them. The man who confused emotional isolation with safety. The man who feared being seen more than he feared losing anything or anyone. And once she saw him that clearly, there was no going back, no rebuilding the illusion, no pretending to be the myth when someone knew the truth. And that frightened him more than anything else in his life. More than poverty, more than professional failure, more than any physical danger, because those things threatened his survival. But Sondra threatened something deeper. She threatened his carefully constructed identity, his understanding of who he was and how he operated in the world. And that kind of threat, the kind that comes from genuine intimacy, was something Clint had spent his entire life avoiding. Because Clint Eastwood knew how to survive disappointment, rejection, loneliness, and fame, but he did not know how to survive being vulnerable. He had built his life around never needing anyone, never depending on anyone, never letting anyone close enough to hurt him. And then Sondra came along and dismantled all of that without even trying. They met in 1975, and from the first moment, something changed. Their connection wasn't romantic in the way magazines wanted it to be. It wasn't elegant or sentimental. It was intense, volatile, dangerous. The kind of connection that makes you feel alive and uncomfortable at the same time. The kind that doesn't settle, it burns slowly, leaving marks that never disappear. She was cast in The Outlaw Josie Wales, a film Clint was directing and starring in, and there was something about her that unsettled him from the start. She didn't defer to him the way most people on set didn't treat his word as final, didn't seem impressed by his reputation or intimidated by his presence. She challenged his creative choices, questioned his direction, pushed back when she disagreed, and instead of being irritated, he was fascinated. Around everyone else, Clint was composed, controlled, the director, the star, the man in charge. Around her, he wasn't. With Sondra Locke, silence stopped being his weapon and became his weakness. She challenged him, questioned him, refused to orbit around his world the way others did. She didn't treat him like a legend, she treated him like a man, and he had no idea how to exist that way. Because being a legend was easy. You just maintained the image, delivered the performance, stayed in character. But being a man required something he didn't know how to give: honesty, vulnerability, the willingness to be wrong. Their relationship didn't grow into peace, it deepened into tension. It wasn't built on tenderness, it was built on conflict, dependence, and unspoken fear. They fought constantly, about work, about life, about everything and nothing. But the fighting felt alive in a way that scared him, because it meant she mattered, it meant she could get to him, it meant she had power he'd never given anyone before. He tried to control it the way he controlled everything else, his image, his career, the story people believed about him, but she was the one part of his life that refused to be managed. And instead of accepting that, instead of letting go of control and seeing where genuine connection might lead, he did what he always did. He compartmentalized. He created parallel realities. He convinced himself he could have everything as long as he was careful enough.
And instead of letting her go honestly, he chose something far worse. He tried to keep her while keeping the life he'd never truly let go of. Because that's how Clint operated. He didn't make clean breaks. He didn't close doors. He kept options open, maintained relationships that should have ended, promised things to multiple people that he couldn't possibly deliver. Not out of malice necessarily, but out of a fundamental inability to choose, to commit, to risk everything on one person. He was still legally married to Maggie Johnson, his first wife. That marriage had been over in every meaningful sense for years, but he never finalized the divorce. And while he was with Sondra, building a life with her, letting her believe she was his future, he was also involved with other women, secret relationships, hidden children, entire parallel lives that Sondra knew nothing about. Years passed, secrets layered on top of silence, commitments blurred into contradictions. What began as a love story slowly turned into something neither of them could recognize anymore. And like most damage, it didn't arrive suddenly. It arrived slowly, quietly, one compromise at a time, one lie that seemed small, one omission that felt justified, one boundary crossed that led to the next one being easier to cross. Sondra gave up her own career ambitions to be available to him, to star in his films, to support his vision, to be there whenever he needed her. And he took that devotion and used it against her, made her feel like she needed him more than he needed her, like she should be grateful for the opportunities he gave her, like leaving would mean losing everything she'd built. And when she finally discovered the truth, the other women, the secret children, the lies that had been foundation of their entire relationship, it didn't just break her heart, it broke her sense of reality. Because she'd believed him, had trusted him completely, had rearranged her entire life around someone who was lying to her every single day. Eventually, the truth stopped hiding. Not just in lawsuits, though those came, the palimony case that exposed everything, the revelations about abortions he pressured her into, about sterilization procedures he insisted on so he wouldn't have to worry about more complications, about a man who wanted complete access to another person while giving nothing real in return. Not just in headlines, though those came too, the media frenzy, the public dissection of their relationship, the narrative shifting from Hollywood romance to something much darker, much uglier, much closer to the truth about power and control, and how easy it is to destroy someone who loves you. But in the emptiness that followed when she was gone, when the noise faded, when there was nobody left to distract him from what he'd done, when he sat alone in houses filled with evidence of his success and felt nothing, when awards and accolades and respect meant nothing because the one person who had actually seen him was gone. That was the part Clint Eastwood never learned to outrun. Not the scandal. Scandals fade. The public moves on. Careers recover. Not the loss. He'd lost people before. Relationships ended. That was life. The silence. The specific, crushing silence that comes after you've destroyed something you actually needed. After you've driven away the one person who saw you clearly and loved you anyway. After you've proven to yourself that you're exactly as incapable of genuine connection as you always feared you were. Because emotional debt always returns. You can bury it beneath work, accomplishments, and new lives, but eventually it waits for the moments when you are alone, and then it asks questions you can no longer avoid answering. Questions like, who are you when nobody's watching? What did you actually build with your life? What did you destroy in the process, and was it worth it? When Clint spoke about her years later, he didn't defend himself. He didn't explain. He didn't justify. He didn't do what he'd spent his entire career doing, maintaining the image, protecting the legend, staying in character. He spoke like a man who finally understood something too late to change it. She broke something in me, he said, and he never figured out how to fix it. For anyone else, words like that might have sounded dramatic, but from him, they sounded like the only honest thing left. Because this wasn't heartbreak. Heartbreak implies a clean wound that heals over time. This was different. This was structural damage. This was discovering that the foundation you built your entire identity on was flawed from the beginning. It wasn't nostalgia. Nostalgia makes the past look better than it was. This was the opposite. This was finally seeing the past clearly, seeing what he'd done, who he'd hurt, what he'd sacrificed in service of an image that meant nothing in the end.
It was the realization that Sondra Locke was the only person he ever allowed close enough to do real damage, and that once she was gone, he couldn't rebuild the armor without seeing the cracks she left behind. Couldn't go back to being the myth because she'd shown him the man underneath. And that man was someone he didn't particularly like, someone capable of cruelty. Someone who used control to avoid intimacy. Someone who destroyed love because he was too afraid to accept it. In his final years, surrounded by awards, legacy, and the applause of an entire lifetime, it wasn't the victories he remembered, not the Oscars, not the box office records, not the critical acclaim, not the respect of his peers. None of it carried weight when he was alone with his thoughts. It was her. The silence after her, the understanding that arrived too late, and the truth he could no longer outrun. Because here's what Clint finally understood, decades too late to matter. The thing he feared most, vulnerability, genuine connection, being truly seen, was the only thing that could have saved him. Everything he did to protect himself, all the walls he built, all the distance he maintained, all the control he insisted on, it didn't protect him. It isolated him. It turned him into exactly the person he claimed he wasn't. Someone who valued image over reality, performance over truth, control over love. Sondra Locke died in 2018, and when the news reached him, according to people who were there, he didn't react the way anyone expected. He didn't express sadness or regret or any of the emotions you might anticipate. He just went quiet, stiller than usual, like something inside him had finally stopped moving. Because as long as she was alive, somewhere in the world, there was still the theoretical possibility of reconciliation, of explanation, of some kind of resolution. Her death closed that door permanently. She died angry at him, died without forgiving him, died carrying scars from what he'd done to her. and he has to live with that knowledge for however many years he has left. Has to know that the person who knew him best, who loved him despite knowing him, went to her grave hating what he'd done to her. And there's no fixing that, no apology that reaches beyond death, no chance for redemption. Even at 95 years old, he still carried her, not as a love story, not as regret, but as a permanent reminder of what it costs to keep distance where vulnerability should have been, and how some wounds never stop echoing once the world finally goes quiet. She lives in the spaces between his achievements, in the moments between takes, in the silence that follows applause, a permanent ghost reminding him of the one thing he got completely wrong. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not that he hurt her, not that he lost her, but that he finally understood, after she was gone, after it was too late to change anything, what she actually meant, what she was trying to give him, what he destroyed because he was too afraid to accept it. At 95 years old, Clint Eastwood sits with that knowledge, and it's heavier than any award, more permanent than any legacy, more real than any myth he ever created. Because in the end, the man with no name has to live with a name after all. The name she gave him, the name only she knew, the name he spent his entire life running from. Human, flawed, capable of destroying the only thing that ever mattered. If you found this story worth your time, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.